my name's Doug Van Dyke. I am the General Manager at Amazon Web Services for our federal civilian and nonprofit businesses. I've been doing that for about 3 years. And what amazes me, what I love, and I love it about the Cloud Computing Exchange, is how much the conversation has changed over the last 3 years with regards to cloud. And everyone in here has been working with the federal government for a long time. Who has seen the government move this fast before? When I started over 3 years ago, the question was, the cloud, it's too risky. How do I get to the cloud? It's too risky. And what I've seen over the last 3 years is that conversation has changed to, it is too risky for me to stay on site. How do I get into the cloud? And it's not lower prices that are bringing people into the cloud. It's agility, it's security, and it's innovation. And I'll elaborate a little bit on this. The same agile techniques that are being used on the West Coast and Silicon Valley for the startups that are building worldwide applications, those same technologies are now available to the federal government. And so it's causing the federal government to think differently and to act differently. And the question is no longer, am I going to the cloud? It's how do I take my mission workloads into the cloud? And what do I do with them when I get there? How do I run in the cloud my mission critical applications with enterprise efficiency? And then, I'm happy to see, Steve, that the last part of this is how do I do a procurement for cloud technologies that allows me to meet my federal mandates, but also get all of the benefits of the cloud? To get the lower price, to get the efficiencies, the agile development, and the security that are all the benefits that the commercial world is getting out of the cloud. So what I have seen is just having access to cloud technologies is making the federal government think differently. And so we're starting to get an innovative thought process going in the federal government. And so it's not just limited to a few people in the federal government that are thinking differently. Innovators are moving into the federal government, and it's really exciting. And it brings me to the reason why I was really invited to be here, and that is to introduce Tony Scott. So, Tony is the 3rd Federal Chief Information Officer. Before he was working for the United States government, he was the Global Information Technology Group Vice President at VMware. Sorry, that's a question mark. Before that, from 2008 to 2013, he was the Chief Information Officer at Microsoft. From 2005 to 2008, he was the CIO at Walt Disney. From 1999 to 2005, he was the Chief Technology Officer of Information Systems and Services at General Motors Corporation. He has a BA from the University of San Francisco, a JD from Santa Clara University. And I also need to add that I had the opportunity to work at Microsoft at the same time that Tony Scott was there. And he was one of my favorite senior executive speakers for a couple reasons. First, his background is amazing. And he is able to simplify every conversation to something a kid from Iowa could understand. So he can take these amazingly complex topics, make them relatively simple to understand, and it's because he draws on real-world examples to bring life to the conversation. So without any more from me, I'd like to introduce Tony Scott, the U.S. Federal CIO.
Appreciate it. I didn't know you were from Iowa, so I was born in Davenport, so maybe that's how we relate. Well, good morning. I thought what I would do is just share a few perspectives. I'm kind of 4 months sort of into the role, and I figured out where the bathroom is. I've testified to Congress a couple of times, and we've had a couple of CIO forum meetings. We even took a group of our CIOs out to Silicon Valley and toured them around. Went up to Seattle and toured around, and we're going to do a East Coast technology company swing here shortly as well. And I think it's important to get out of Washington every once in a while. This weekend, I actually did that. I decided I needed to get out of Washington. I looked at the weather forecast. It was thunderstorms. I looked at the weather forecast for Los Altos Hills, where my home is. I said, I'm going there for the weekend. And it was a great 24 hours in Silicon Valley. And not that Silicon Valley is any better than Washington or there's smarter people there or anything else, but for me it's get out of the bubble, get out of the context, look at things from a different perspective. And I actually learned more in Phoenix, where my stopover was, than I did anything that I was in California. What I learned is I don't want to be in Phoenix. It was even hotter in Phoenix than it was in Washington, D.C. So it was a fun trip. What I thought I would really talk to you about today is just a couple of observations I've made on the journey to the cloud. And I do think it's a journey. All of us who've been in a CIO role, everybody I know, sort of gets it. It's like there's not a lot of debate anymore. It's, all right, this is kind of the way to go, and we should be doing it, and so on. But what I found is, like in a lot of places, and I think it's very true here in Washington, there's a lot of talk. People love to make speeches. They love to pontificate. They like to tell you what should be done. They like to tell you what the benefits of the end result would be, sort of stuff. Then there's the actual doing the work. And when you say, all right, come on, let's go do the work, the room empties. It's like turning the light on and the cockroaches head for the, cabinets or the closets or something. And so I've decided that in my role, for whatever time I'm here, it's all about what I call landing the plane. And some of you may have heard me before. I'm a pilot. And one of the things I learned early on as I started my flying experiences, I could teach any one of you to take a plane off. It's super easy. In about your second or third try, any of you could take a plane off. I even got to be in a simulator not too long ago, and I got to take off a 777 airplane. And with my meager pilot skills, even I could take a 777 off in the simulator. It's another whole thing to fly the plane once you've taken off, and landing is even harder. It takes lots of practice. You have to do it over and over and over and over to get good at it. And all of us fly commercially. You know that even with experienced pilots, every once in a while there's a rough landing. Now let me translate that to the journey to the cloud. Here's a couple of the things I've learned about flying that plane and landing that plane. The first one is, what are the right applications? What are the decisions I need to make in the governance process in my organization that's going to lead to an outcome that says, we're going to take this set of things and we're going to re-platform it and move to a different platform, to a different environment. We're going to think about what we're doing differently. And how do you even tee up those conversations? I would tell you there's a couple of ways that I know and that I've seen work pretty well. The first one is don't waste a good crisis. Anytime you've got, the board of directors involved, or in this case, you've got Congress involved, or you've got, public outroar, or you've got consumers upset, or any one of those kinds of things, bullseye, there's a great target. Seize the moment. And I got to experience this directly at Disney and at Microsoft and even VMware. In each of those cases, we had a compelling business reason to say, what we're doing isn't working very well. Let's move, let's get to a different outcome. So that's one good thing. Look for crises. And in a time of a crisis, people are a lot more open to thinking about how they do things than at any other time. The second thing that I've seen is when there's a great business opportunity and you just can't do it sort of any other way. Now, sometimes those come along a little bit more rarely, and in the federal government business, we're not generally in the business of opening up new businesses. We're not starting whole new departments or whatever. But there are paradigm shifts that occur where the businesses that we thought we were in have changed dramatically. And in a lot of cases, that's the digitization of the business itself. It's an opportunity to think differently about what is the business that I'm in, and how am I going to do it, and how am I going to serve our customers. And I saw this dramatically at Disney. If you talk to the TV folks a few years ago at Disney, they would tell you they were in the broadcast TV business. They thought their business was, creating programs, selling advertising, and putting it out over the broadcast airways. That's a part of their business today, but I can assure you there's no one in that business that thinks that's their only business, or in some cases, even their core business today. And those shifts could not have been carried out using the old infrastructure and the old techniques. So that's a great opportunity. Business and government are digitizing at a rapid rate. Anything that can digitize will. And digitization is different than automation. If you're like me, any of you, you spent an early part of your career in IT taking things that might have been paper forms and throwing that paper form up on a screen for people to fill out. And unfortunately, we still have way too many examples of that in the federal government. I love to get on some of our government websites and literally see the paper representation of the old form. It tells you that we're probably not thinking about that the right way. And the Paperwork Reduction Act has caused some other, sort of interesting issues with respect to that. But we have to move away from that form kind of paradigm to what are our citizens looking for? What do they want to do? What are the services and what are the outcomes that they're looking for? And then what's the easiest way to enable that? And get rid of the clutter of all the other things that have gotten in the way. The next thing I would talk to you about is the business conversation and the CFO conversation. And this one I found really fascinating. I used to run a CIO summit at Microsoft for the world's largest companies and the CIOs that run those. And we would typically, every year, get 100 to 150 of the top CIOs, the biggest companies in the world. And cloud was a great conversation there. And we had a similar conference for CFOs, which I would also go to talk to. And I used to ask the following question at both the CIO summit and the CFO summits. Here's the question. I would start the conversation by talking about the cloud and the economic benefits and the ability to scale up and scale down as one needed for projects or even for seasonal variations or whatever. And I would ask the CIOs the following question. You've got two different models. One is a highly variable price model where you just pay for what you use, and you can scale up and scale down as you need to. Or you have a choice like a lot of self-plans where you can sort of even it out over time in bank minutes or bank costs and so on. But it's going to be a little bit more expensive. Which do you choose? Now, if you're A CIO, how do you think they answered? Do you think they answered, I want the lowest cost, or do you think they wanted the smoothed out plan? Those who think it was the smoothed out plan, raise your hand. Those who thought they want the lowest cost, raise your hand. Okay, most of you think like CIOs, I can tell. They said, we want smoothed out costs. It eases our pain from a budgeting perspective. It's fewer conversations I have to have with the CFO, you know, all that kind of stuff. When we asked the question of CFOs, guess which way they answered? Anybody think the CFOs said, I'll pay a little more? CFOs said, I want the lowest cost. I love talking to my CIO. Anytime he comes in and tells me he's figured out a way to save money, I love it. So it tells you there's some work to do, and there's a disconnect between, you know, what CIOs may think or make it life easier for them and what CFOs want. And I have to weave in a little FATAR comment here. I think that's what's at the spirit behind FATAR, is to get a better dialogue going in the E-suite in federal agencies, and it has to happen in private industry as well, where the whole of the management team are highly aligned on one page around what our objectives are, what we're trying to accomplish, and how we're trying to do it. Now that may sound like a little thing to you, but I think it's actually a big thing. Getting organizational alignment, getting governance right, is the single most important thing a CIO can do. I would put it above getting to the cloud, even though I know I'm here and why I'm here. I would put that above anything else. It is the key to success at the end of the day. And so how do you land the plane? Get great governance, seize the moment. I would tell you, start with pilots, get people tuned up, exercise the muscle of getting things to the cloud. It's an interesting journey. When I started it with my team at Microsoft, we found all kinds of things that we had to do to make it work. In everything I've done since, somewhere along the way, we found a little thing that got in our way, and we had to go figure out how to get around it and so on. And these are all startup kinds of problems. These are all inertia kinds of problems. Anybody from Boeing here? No? I love the analogy that, you know, Boeing loses money on every new plane it builds for the first couple of hundred until they work out the manufacturing process and so on and get it efficient, and they can start doing things at volume and with speed. And some of the early experiences in the cloud were that way. You know, the experimentation and the, you know, kicking the rocks out of the way wiped out some of the savings that one initially got. But I think we're at a point right now, in fact, I know we're at a point right now where we've crossed over that hill. There's enough stuff there, the costs are low enough, and the incentives are high enough that it's not a question of if or even when, but how fast can we get there. I'm a huge fan. Now, I do have one request for our cloud providers and those that are in the business of servicing the federal government. I think we need more and more and more scalable enterprise services to really provide the acceleration on the next wave. What is that? We've talked with Amazon and Microsoft and a bunch of the others about these. But if you think about what every federal agency does, there's a couple of high-level work patterns that every agency more or less does. We take in information, request for some citizen or some corporation or whatever to do things. We collect data from you in some ways. You want a license, or you want a permit, or you want a grant, or you want something that the government has the ability to allow you to do. It's passed around to a whole bunch of people who have to look at that information, rule on its merits, comment, whatever, check a bunch of other things. Did you pay your taxes? Are you entitled to this? Whatever. And then there's an adjudication process. A decision gets made, maybe in parallel or maybe in serial. And then there's an outcome. You get a license, you get a permit, you get something. That general work pattern is everywhere in the federal government. It's how we spend most of our dollars doing things like that. Think about, the acquisition process. We want to buy something. We put out, request. A bunch of people respond. Then a bunch of people inside agencies look at it, and compare and contrast, and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, we award a contract. That's all that same meta process. What I don't want to do as we journey to the cloud is replicate in silos all the business logic and all of the capability that exists in those siloed forms today. That would be stupid. That would be like in the early 1900s, cars were called horseless carriages. And there were some places that required you to have a buggy whip holder in the car when it didn't apply anymore, okay? I don't want to do that same thing. I don't want to replicate the old architecture, the old logic, and so on. We need cloud platforms that are secure by design, scalable web services that one who's building an application can take advantage of, and then what's already there, the lower runtime and operational costs. And all that translates into one more thing, and I love Doug's start here about what the benefits of the cloud are. The single best advantage at the end of the day, I don't think is going to be lower cost or even agility or even security, although I think all of those are absolutely required. I think it's speed. Speed to market, speed to solution, speed to meet the needs of whatever our citizens need or our companies need or our business needs are. That's where we've got to sort of draw the line and say we're going to do everything we can to get faster and faster and faster to be competitive in the global economy that we have today. That's the ultimate mark, the ultimate measure. And I'll conclude by saying when I talk to CFOs about cost, they all tell me, every single one, if I could get there faster, I'll pay a little more. When I talk to CEOs and ask the same question, they say, I love low cost, but if I can get speed, I'll pay a little more. And how much speed means how much more they're willing to pay. The federal government is no different. We're just in a different race. And what we need is speed. And so the thing I'd ask of this audience is help us use your brain and help us figure out, and I love the concept of Brainstorm, how we can get more speed in this engine to get more and more and more of our federal agencies and federal applications and so on the cloud. Speed is everything in this day and age, and particularly when it comes to some of the most pressing problems that we're trying to address. All right, that's it. Appreciate all your support.